The West Asia war is in a pretty whole new dangerous phase. Now, Tehran has said that America is launching Himars rocket strikes against Iran from the American military bases that it has in the Gulf nations. And our next report decodes if the Gulf nations are now launch pads in America's war with Iran.
The battlefield is expanding. The U.S. is ramping up its firepower against Iran. Pentagon chief says that the attacks are systematically destroying Iranian missile facilities and vows that the attacks are only going to increase.
Iran stands alone, and they are badly losing. One, destroy their missile stockpiles, their missile launchers, and their defense industrial base. Missiles and their ability to make them. Two, destroy their navy.
These images released by US CENTCOM show Himars in action in a desert area. It claims the multi-purpose rocket launcher can provide unrivaled deep strike capability in combat against Iran. However, the US military has not disclosed the location of the launch site. On March 1st, just a day after the war began, US released similar images. The CENTCOM claimed it is conducting precision strikes at targets linked to Iran, though it fell short of admitting its use of Himars. The estimated range of the Himars system is roughly 300 to 500 kilometers, depending on the type of missile. While the US hasn't officially said which base it is using to launch these ground-based missiles, experts say the US is using bases in the Gulf states to deploy rocket artillery systems against Iran. The systems could have been positioned along the southern coast of the Persian Gulf, where several US military bases are located. Iran Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has accused US forces of using the territory of Iran's neighbors to launch attacks against the country. He has defended Iran's retaliatory attacks on US bases in the Gulf countries. The move by the US is in complete contrast to previous assertions by Saudi Arabia and the UAE. The Gulf neighbors of Iran had vowed that they would not allow their airspace or territory to be used for military actions against Tehran. Iran has repeatedly warned that any US assets used to launch attacks against Iranian territory will be considered legitimate targets. Tehran vows to continue its fight against Israeli and American aggression.
The enemy has waged war against Iran and against the Iranian people. The enemy has not come to fight an ideology, it has come to wage war against Iran.
US President Trump says the war will end soon while threatening to hit Iran harder.
A lot of work, a lot of brilliant work, but we're going to have a much safer world as soon as it's finished, and it's going to be finished pretty quickly.
If Trump's threat materializes, US bases across the Gulf and the nations hosting them could find themselves on the front line of a widening regional war. The West Asia conflict is entering an increasingly volatile phase, where every launch could trigger the next escalation. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
All right, now joining us on the broadcast, we've got Mr. Andy Kaiser, who's a senior fellow at the National Security Institute and a former senior advisor at the House Intelligence Committee. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Kaiser, thank you very much for joining us here on WION. Now, Iran is stating pretty clearly that the Americans are in fact launching these Himars rockets at Iran from these American bases in the Gulf. In your assessment, these military bases that the Americans have in the Gulf nations, instead of providing protection to the Gulf nations, have they now become the source, or rather the reason as to why these Gulf nations have come under attack in this war?
I think that's part of it, but prior to these missiles coming, you saw Iran sort of lashing out at several of its neighbors, some of which we expected, like the Saudis and the Emiratis, but also, launching missiles at traditional, if not allies, certainly folks that they deal with, have a relationship with, a diplomatic relationship. I'm thinking of the Qataris and the Turks, for example, which, starts to limit the amount of friends they have in the region in a hurry.
All right, but the Iranians are pretty clear that they're not hitting at these Gulf nations, but rather the American military assets there that they say have been used in this war. Now, the other thing that I want to ask you, Mr. Kaiser, is this. Now, there's a lot of talk that the American president could in fact send in some ground forces to try and retrieve the enriched uranium that the Iranians have. A lot of people are saying that this is going to be a very, very perilous mission, including Mark Esper, who was the defense secretary in the first Trump government. In your assessment, do you think Donald Trump is likely to order something like this?
Well, certainly the nuclear program is a high level, has a high level of interest among this administration, this president, presidents in the past, of course. So I think that is the primary target. Secondarily, the ballistic missile program that Iran has been building and perfecting, and perhaps thirdly, their naval capacity, which has been limited in recent strikes. The other thing I might mention on the regional allies that have been hit, or the other nations, we saw hotels on fire, we saw oil infrastructure targeted. Those are certainly not U.S. weapons.
But the Iranians have turned around and said that these are places where they thought that there are American military or intelligence units who are stationed there. And that is the reason why these hotels and other residential places, in fact, came under attack. We'll have to leave it there, though. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Andy Kaiser, for joining us with your perspective.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.